Today in our time, we're not going to go over everything pertaining to a type 1, but our hope is that you leave with more understandings for the patterns of the type 1. And oftentimes, when folks are first learning about the Enneagram, they'll learn it more based on behaviors or external characteristics. And what Scott and I are hoping to do with the Nine Styles series is really get underneath. So we're going to be talking about potentially the not so rosy pieces, also the virtues of each of the type, really what motivates them to then manifest these different behaviors or characteristics that we know about the different types. But really, our hope is to get underneath by talking about the emotional passion and then, of course, talking about the instincts, which then turn into subtypes. We're going to spend a majority of time on the panel. So we have a handful of people here that are being so courageous and sharing about their thought patterns and experience being dominant in this Enneagram type, which we're so thankful that you all are here and sharing your story. So thank you. And then we're going to start, although we're spending most of the time on the panel, Scott and I are just going to go a little bit of an overview about the type 1 and about the Enneagram. So my name's Ashley. I'm a team development coach. I'm also the founder of Sway. I studied at the CP Enneagram Academy, and I love this tool because it has really helped me in my personal growth journey. It's helped me with my marriage, and that's when I went on to study it so I could use it as a tool to work with other people to gain self-awareness and ultimately, hoping that they'll find freedom in their personal life and professional life. That's how I met Scott. Scott is the idea person behind the Ennea Flip, and I'm so glad that he connected with me and wanted to collaborate in bringing the Ennea Flip to life.
Thanks, Ashley. So yeah, I'm Scott. Great to be with you right now. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to have this conversation with us. I do primarily leadership development work, and I work in the emotional intelligence space. And my passion for the last several years has been working with Enneagram in both of those spaces to help people connect to a truer picture of who they are, what they really want, what's driving their behaviors, and how they can better understand the impact that they make on the world around them. So I love moments like this to be able to contribute to conversations and ask questions and learn from you. To underscore what Ashley said, we can talk theory all day long, but we learn the most from hearing from people who are of any type that we talk to. So thank you again.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of the information that we're going to talk about today, we're just pulling from the Ennea Flip. And Scott, what is the Enneagram?
So it sounds like you all have a pretty good familiarity with the Enneagram. So I'm sure we're all at different levels. But at the end of the day, the Enneagram is a sense-making system to help us uncover why we do what we do, the storied filters by which we view the world, ways in which that we adapted to a certain way of seeing, feeling, and thinking in order to make sense of the world as young people, and how those ways of seeing, thinking, and feeling can sometimes interfere with what it is we really want from life. And so we contain all 9 types, right? So there's 9 primary types. Within each type, there are 3 primary variations known as subtypes, which we'll talk more about as we go on. And the system is, we don't have we'll show you in a minute the diagram, but which you've seen, I'm sure, a million times. But the way we approach teaching the Enneagram is often based on the 3 primary intelligence centers: the body types, which are 8s, 9s, and 1s, and the heart types, which are 2, 3s, and 4s, and the head types, which are 5s, 6, and 7s. Again, just to underscore, as the Enneagram becomes more popular, people can fixate greatly on certain generalization, behavior traits that we often see in a certain type. We try very hard to stay away from those generalizations because the Enneagram isn't just a typology that is meant to describe behaviors, but again, to really help us get underneath um, the waterline of consciousness to understand, why is it that I behave this way? Why is it that these relationship patterns show up time and again in my life?
Yeah.
Why is it that I struggle with this type and that type? So hopefully we'll be able to hone in on that for once. Ashley, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think too, just remembering that we have, like, we're human beings, and this is just like one theory out of many personality assessments and frameworks and ways to understand yourself. So use it as a self reflection tool, and know that we have all 9 types in us. We have all instincts in us. Just one, the volume is turned up so loud that you can't really hear the other 8. And so the goal is to learn how to turn that volume a little lower to integrate the other pieces of yourself, and that this is a lifelong journey. It takes a lot of time. And the type that you're dominant in comes with a lot of strengths and superpowers. And we're going to talk about those. So, some common names for the type 1. Type 1s are in the Body Intelligence Center, and they're known as the perfectionist, they're known as the performer, the idealist. So you might hear them by these different types. And then this is the shape that it's a visual aid that we identify with the type 1. It kind of looks like a compass or a star, just pointing at this idea that ones are always asking, well, what is true north? Like, what is goodness? And how can I build my life around following those things? Ones tend to see the world in black and white. So last time we talked about nines being living in the gray area. It's like, I think this could be right, and I think this could be right. Well, ones want to find what actually is right, and they don't want that gray area. They're people who are asking, what is truth? And how can I design my life around those principles and live inside those boundaries or outside the boundaries if that's the right way to live? We think of the one's external patterns as being rigid, and they are or can be, but really important to remember that this comes from their deep desire to do and to be good. Ones are terrified of being bad and making a mistake or making just a wrong decision in life. And because of this mentality and this desire, rigidity follows. And when you look at their external habits, it might look like being hyper organized or correcting or telling people what to do or living by example. And it's important to remember that it comes from that underlying layer of wanting to be good. Ones know that they're ones because they have a really loud voice. And we call this in the Enneagram community an inner critic. So it's this voice that's telling them how they should live. And the key word there is should. There's a lot of shoulds attached to a one's posture in life. And this inner critic is constantly berating them and instructing them what to do. It's like this strong managerial type voice. If anyone has done internal family systems, there's one character called the manager. And it's this voice that's saying, you need to be on time. You need to do this. You need to do this. And ones, thank you for your high level of responsibility and leadership. Um, and know that that's a helpful strategy, but there's also other strategies to open up to. Scott, what else would you add about the type 1 and just how they show up? And also, if you could talk a little bit about how anger looks like with them.
Yeah. So uh, Ashley said it all really, really well, I think. I would add that no one tries harder than ones.
Hmm, that's
They
really good.
are incredibly focused, ethical, responsible, trustworthy.
Mhm.
Um, they, as Ashley was saying, they can have a struggle with a healthy perception of themselves. That inner critic that I think all types have to a degree is really kind of an ensemble cast. It's a choir of voices for someone's constantly feeding back to them on whether or not they lived up or others lived up to what is often impossibly high internal standards.
Mhm.
They instinctively believe they know what is right and wrong, and that's important as a body type. It's an instinct. It gives them a sense of mission that leads them to want to improve the world in various ways, in whatever degree of influence they have. They strive to overcome moral adversity in the world. That's a commonality they share with all body types. But their experience of anger, so the anger that's in a one, similar to all body types, is that there's this anger that comes from a standing against what is. It's a posture of refusing to accept reality in all of its
Mm-hmm.
defects. But for the one, they categorize anger as also bad, meaning it's not an okay emotion to have.
Hmm.
So they use the defense mechanism of reaction formation to turn what they think is a bad emotion into a more socially acceptable emotion. And that'll vary a lot between subtypes, which we can talk about and ask questions about as we hear from our panelists. One last thing I'd say is that ones often think that they are head types when they're first learning the system, but ones are actually body types who are searching for an acceptable rationale for what they believe they must do or are already doing.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, and I want to hear you talk more about that when we get into the different subtypes, because there's one that especially looks more like a head type. So, the genius of the type one is that high level of responsibility and being attuned toward goodness and how people can live into that. Ones raise the bar and standards. And when they overdo that, Scott had mentioned that they want to do what's right and live into that space, but not everyone, like every Enneagram one can be right, right? That doesn't it doesn't work like that. So their strong moral code that they possess essentially makes their world smaller and more rigid, and they become less flexible and disconnected from the natural order of life, because just look outside. Nature is really messy, and ones need to learn how to find that serenity, that peace in a world that is quite imperfect. And that's the virtue of the type one. So, Enneagram paints this picture of moving from personality or ego, who you are not, to who you actually are, your essence and your true person. So for the typology of the one, that looks like moving from the emotional passion of anger and learning how to talk with anger, befriend anger, and say, yeah, I'm angry because there's a lot to be angry about in the world. And what happens when a one gets stuck in their emotional passion, the anger isn't properly managed because their ones have learned to be in conflict with their anger. It's like anger is bad, or at least two of the subtypes. One of them is a counter type, and so they're also in conflict with it, but it's a little bit more okay. We'll talk about that, but it ends up exploding almost like a pressure canner, because the one is pushing it down, like I shouldn't do this. And then they self deprecate and it's not getting expressed. And what happens is, well, it ends up exploding and it can be painful. And the virtue of the type one, this serenity, like I said, it's this idea of, yeah, the world is perfectly imperfect. Humans are messy. I'm imperfect. That's okay. And there's this like lightness, almost like ones that have been able to befriend and work through that anger and really be in it. It has diffused them and they're able to step into this serenity. So, this is the psyche map from Beatrice Chestnut's book, The Complete Enneagram. And as you can see, you have personality on the bottom where you have the types emotional passion. And the goal is to move to that truer or higher self. So, again, the journey from anger to serenity. Again, pulling from Beatrice Chestnut's work. So she credits Oscar Ichazo for for the instincts, but really flushes them out in her own way. She talks about how each Enneagram type within the nine types have these three instincts: self-preservation, social, and sexual. And although we have all three, there's one that's dominant. And the self preservation instinct focuses attention on and shapes their behavior around material security. So they direct their energy towards safety concerns, including potentially having enough resources. They tend to structure their lives around well being. And so this might look like, owning your own home or taking your multivitamins, or maybe grooming, being a little bit more homebody esque. And this varies amongst the different types. And then you have the social instinct. So this instinct focuses attention on belonging and recognition. And where am I in connection to the herd? Am I the leader? Am I second in command? Am I a follower? And their whole focus is on where they belong socially. And they think a lot about relationships and their power structures and how they fit in. And then the sexual instinct is about this bonding or one on one interactions. These are people who can do one on one time really easily and they get a lot of life from it. They also can bond to a medium or an activity like, I just love hiking, or I just want to be with nature, or be with my art practice, or be with my book. But also, it's about relationships. So they focus on the quality or state of their relationships with specific people in their lives, whether that's a work relationship, or a romantic partner, or just a good friendship, perhaps also like a child. And they seek that sense of well being through these one on one connections. So every type has something called an instinct sequence. So you have all three types, but one of them is the strongest, one of them is a close second, and then the last one is repressed. Also, as we're going through it, it's important to note that within the three instincts and subtypes, um, there's always a type that's like a counter type. So it goes against the emotional passion and instinct essentially are in conflict. So in this type, it's one to one, and you have the one to one or sexual instinct being in conflict with anger, because people who have a sexual instinct are typically more comfortable with anger, but then ones are in conflict with anger, and Scott will talk more about it. But essentially, that's what a counter type is, and this is especially helpful for folks who are unsure about their Enneagram type. I find in typing interviews, this is mostly because they're a counter type on the Enneagram. So they do identify with this type and the emotional passion, but they're in conflict with it. And as you can see, these are the different variations of how the instincts might show up. So Lindsay had asked at the beginning, well, what's the shortenings of the different types? So SP, self-preservation, social is SO, and SX is what we're using for sexual, and that's the different ways that the sequences can look.
So, yeah, I just want to underscore something Ashley was saying, which is, it does take people sometimes a long time to identify with the Enneagram if they don't know subtype, which often isn't taught until much later. Because, like myself, it took me a long time to find my type because I happen to be a counter type as well. I'm a 3 who's a counter type. So understanding these variations aren't just a sort of bolt on to the Enneagram. I think they're actually really essential, and they help to, I think, honor the differences among people of the same type, and really shine a light on just how complex and nuanced we all really are. So the self-preservation one. Now this one is what Claudia Naranjo called this type worry. They are the epitome of the true perfectionist. So we said, sometimes ones are called perfectionists. They are the representative of that among all the ones, in that they want to perfect the things around them, improve them. Yeah, anger is the most repressed. So we talked about reaction formation, putting anger away, and turning it into a different, more quote unquote acceptable emotion. Self-preservation ones are most likely to do that. So reaction formation transforms the heat of anger into warm, and they become excessively gentle, decent, and kind. They can kind of look like a 6 sometimes, in that they tend to have a lot of fear. Self-preservation dominant types can, within all 9 types, can have a little bit more anxiety, be a little more anxiety prone. But ones can really look a little bit more like a 6 that way. However, ones are much more certain and confident about what they think is right, or what they quote unquote know is right, whereas 6s are much less certain and more contrarian in their search for certainty. One other thing I will say about, and this is true of all the ones, but particularly of self-preservation ones, as much as they're working to put away anger and transform it into warmth and something more acceptable, they're likely not as good at it as they think they are. And people around them will experience it as a sort of resentment, a sort of just irritation that kind of comes out even behind the smile.
Mm.
So, well, let's go to socials. So social ones, Naranjo called this type rigidity. So they are not as much of a perfectionist as a self-preservation one. Their focus is more on being perfect, being the model of perfection. Anger with them is half hidden. It comes out a little bit. It comes out more than the self-preservation one, not as much as the one-to-one one, the sexual one. But they're a little bit more obvious with it.
Mm.
They're a more intellectual type in which the main characteristic is control, and they kind of transform anger into a more cold rigidity about what it is that's right. And in that way, they can sometimes even look five-ish, in that they may separate themselves from the crowd and appear to have a posture of being somewhat superior
Mhm.
to others. And the final one is the one-to-one. And Naranjo called this type zeal. Now, this is the counter type, as Ashley mentioned. So they are more of a reformer than a perfectionist.
Mhm.
They turn, we talked about that inner critic. That is particularly true of self-preservation, also true of social. The critic in the one-to-one as a countertype is actually directed more outward in a more obvious ways towards systems and structures and people, and the anger's more, this isn't right, this should be different, this should be a different way. So they're more explicitly angry that way. They can be more impatient, invasive, and sometimes have a sense of entitlement. And in this way, they can sometimes appear eight-ish in their willingness to express anger. However, as Beatrice Chestnut describes, eights tend to be under social and ones are over social.
Hmm. Mhm. Really good. Yeah, so you might, if you're listening to this and you're dominant in one, you're thinking, okay, I'm kind of all of those, but not really that one, but maybe mostly this one. I just want to paint a picture that there's different degrees how these sequences show up. So in this example, you see someone who has like a lot of self-pres, kind of they also identify with sexual, and then not too much social. And then you can see, oh, whoa, this is someone who identifies like a lot with the one-to-one or sexual instinct, but the last two one are like a close second. Like they're not even sure which one um, is their repressed one, but they know for sure that they're dominant in the sexual instinct. And then this is an example of maybe someone who's in between, like a top two, as Scott was sharing the subtypes. They're like, like, yes, social's my dominant, but honestly, self preservation could be this close second. And then
Can
the
I underscore
goal,
a point here?
yeah,
Sorry, you
please.
might be coming to this, but I just want to underscore something that you did cover already, but I think it's really important, is that all three of our instincts are naturally supposed to be not in imbalance. They're supposed to be balanced, and it's not something we have to think about or feel our way towards. It's just they're just meant to fire when we need them, right? So when that self-preservation instinct is needed, it fires, and as soon as it's not needed anymore, it stops firing. But when they
Right,
get out of balance, what happens is the dominant one is firing even when you don't need it to. It's just happening,
right.
and it steals energy from the others, which means that your repressed instinct isn't switching on even when you do need it to. And we'll talk more about how to work toward bringing those into balance. And I think that's where you were going, Ashley. So I think I stole your slide.
No, that's so good. Still all the slides you want. But even in that example, I'm thinking about Aranio Pais, and he's one of the Enneagram teachers that Scott and I studied under. And he says, you want to think about your dominant instinct as this lion that's in your house, like an actual physical dangerous cat predator that's in your house. And when you open the door, you're like, are they outside? Can I run to the bathroom? Can I scurry to the kitchen to get something to eat? And the idea is it's in control. It's managing you. You don't even think about it. You just know it's like a survival instinct, and then you act in that way. And then your repressed instinct, it's like a starving puppy in your basement. Which is a really powerful and sad image. But the idea is it's like, oh, I don't feed that. I forget about it. It's out of sight, out of mind. And it's like hungry for your attention. And the goal of the Enneagram in using it for personal growth is balancing out your instincts. So, learning how to tame that dominant one so it's not in control and really bring to life that repressed one, so you're able to access what's appropriate for a situation. So in this example right here, this person might be accessing a social instinct saying, well, I'm just going to continue to lead by example. And maybe they're acting even a little bit superior in a work setting where they're like, okay, I'm just going to keep on leading by example. And maybe people aren't getting it. Maybe people aren't picking up what you're putting down. You're not being direct, you're being indirect. And perhaps using the one to one instinct, the reformer, the someone who's more comfortable saying, hey, you need to do this, X, Y, and Z. Please do that. Thank you. They might need to access more of that strategy just to put some more body to it. So let's hear from our type ones because that's why we're all here and that's the most valuable time or valuable to our time. Hi, everyone. Everyone and everyone's. That's too much. I hear you. So if you are not on the panel, I invite you to stay on mute, but also if you could close out your camera so just people can focus in. And if you're watching, go ahead and put it on either gallery view or speaker, and then whoever's speaking will just come to the front. And we want to hear from our ones. So for those who are on the panel, what I want you to do is just introduce yourself. What is your subtype? And then share an example of a story of what it's like being a one, or perhaps when you first knew you were a one, whatever way you want to go with that, but just share a clear example for everyone.
Well, hello, my name is Laura Beavis. I identify with being a self-preservation one. And I feel like there's so many examples, like little ones every day that speak to what perfectionism or just being a type one is like for me. I kind of have like an outward and an inward one. Outwardly, the way that you would see it show up is literally this past week, I was power washing our little patio and like was getting so much satisfaction from just like seeing the lines and like making each section really clean. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that was so fun. I need to do another thing. So I found another thing to power wash. And then I was like, oh my gosh, my rental is about up. I have to return this. I could have power washed the whole garage. And while doing that, like this intense focus where I'm like literally doing it for 4 hours straight and like very focused in on it, I also like didn't eat. I didn't drink anything. My hand is still sore because of squeezing the thing. And I think it's kind of a picture also of just how sometimes that focus on wanting things to be like really perfect and complete, it can also cause me to repress my own needs and impulses like drinking water and eating something and resting my hand. Inwardly, I feel like I have almost a constant conflict of what's right and wrong. And I think that also can come with my impulses, to where not only do I repress anger because it feels wrong, but I can also repress all those like really human needs that I mentioned, like with power washing. I have a really tuned eye towards what is wrong. I can't really change that I see those things, but I do. I'm finding that I have the choice to fix it or not. And also, I appreciate this about being one in that I not only see what is wrong, but I have a vision and dream about what is possible and what could be beautiful. So yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
I could go next. I'm Lane. Um, I guess I'll tell you a story. So, when I was trying to type myself for the first time, I misidentified as a three for a while because externally, threes and ones can do a lot of the same stuff and be about the same activities. And so I thought, oh, like I'm a leader, I'm an achiever, so therefore I'm a three. And then I remember as I continued to study and learn, like a memory like popped into my head from my childhood where my mom asked me, Lane, what do you want to be when you grow up? I think I was like 10 years old. And I didn't really know. So I thought about it for a second and I said, I need to be a Marine. And she was like, why? And I was like, well, life isn't worth living unless I can sacrifice myself for those I love. I'm like 10 years old talking about sacrificing myself for the greater good. And when I remembered that story, I was like, holy cow, like that's characterized how I see myself, is like it's a story of self-sacrificing for the greater good. At least that's the heroic tale that I tell myself, right? Like I relate a lot to Captain America on the Avengers team, right? Like he's always laying his life down on the lie. On the line. He's never going to cut the wire. He's going to lay down on the wire. And even an example of my subtype, the social one, I found myself surprised when during the excellent presentation that Scott and Ashley gave, I found myself surprised that I was learning something new because I was invited on the panel to be the expert that consults everyone because I know the best way to go about being a one. So it was one of those things where it's like I have this ego that assumes I know the correct way to do things and I set the example for others. And that can play out as self-righteousness in my shadow. I've also realized that when I'm aware of that, I can hone. You talk about moving towards serenity. Another way I'd like to think about that is like loosening my grip. So it's like even though I may have a tight hold on what I think is right and what I think is best, when I learn how to loosen that grip, there's wisdom that comes upon me. There's serenity, where it's like I don't necessarily lose that sense of right. I don't necessarily lose that moral compass, but the need for control is relinquished. And then when I have this open-handed posture, I'm able to learn, I'm able to grow, and I'm able to have more serenity, more peace in the lack of control. So that's a little bit about my experience as a social one.
That's so good. And I love that like physical posture that you just kept doing of like releasing your hands. And I'm wondering for you, when you release that control, in what ways is it like a physical action compared to like a mental action?
Perfect example of this, actually. And it's a little heavy, so I apologize, but the Texas shooting that happened in the elementary school on Tuesday. I have a son who's 5, and I dropped him off at school on Wednesday. And I had to literally let go of him. And it didn't feel right that I had to feel what I was feeling when I let go of him. But there was a wisdom in me, there was a maturity that I think I've grown into, where I've realized 99% of my life is actually outside of my control, and learning to be at peace with that lack of control. So literally the physical letting go of him was like releasing trust. And I'm a person of faith. I'm a pastor as well. And so for me, that's directly connected to my faith in God, which I find to be a really helpful thing as a one, when I think I know best. There's kind of this understanding that I never actually do, that I have to trust something beyond myself. And so, yeah, that's a kind of a messy way to answer that question. But
no, it's not. It's a beautiful way to answer that question, Lane. And I just want to say that, returning to the virtue of our type is a letting go, right? It's not a striving to get back to the virtue. It's a releasing our grip on the passion, which the passion for all 9 types is a strategy for trying to get back to the virtue, ironically, and keeping us from doing so, right? It's the releasing of the anger, it's the releasing of the control, that allows us to return to serenity. So I think that was a beautiful example. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, I'll share next. So I think for me, it's a little bit like what Lane was saying about, he was saying sacrificing for the sort of the greater good. But I think I have a similar feeling, but I would be more likely to sacrifice for like those close to me. So not the whole, I mean, I have a vision of the common good, but I'm going to do that through my one-to-one interactions. So I'm going to sacrifice more for, so that things are better for the people around me. Here's the story I'll tell um, to an example of it. So as I was preparing for being part of this panel, Ashley had given us a few questions, and typically I can go through those and I can have lots of ideas about what I might want to talk about or some examples. And I found myself just sort of like, I didn't have any examples to give. I didn't know what stories I wanted to use, and I was sort of floundering about that. So last night, and I just thought, well, is it okay if I wing it? I don't really know. I'm not going to be prepared. So then my critic was just like pounding on me. Oh, you're not prepared enough. You're not going to do it if you don't do all the things, right? And so I was having a little bit of trouble going to sleep last night because I think I was just a little anxious about it in general. So my critic was piling on, and then it went into obscure places like, and you should have eaten that cookie, and I mean, just all these things, you know. And then, so I realized that's how it works. The critic is trying to control the anxiety and the chaos that I'm feeling, the uncertainty that I'm feeling. And um, what I finally realized, like about an hour before now, was I was like, oh, what I'm doing is I'm being over responsible for the whole entire thing. Like, I feel like it's my responsibility that every person on this panel, everybody on this thing, and whoever watches it is going to get something from it. And I'm representing the ones correctly, and that I'm making sure Ashley and Scott's, program goes well. Like, I'm just like, I feel like the whole thing is on me to make sure it's all good. So I'm just being over responsible for the whole thing. And as soon as I realized, oh, there's my over responsibility again, I was like, okay, I can let go of that now. Like, I didn't used to be able to let go of it. Now I feel like, okay, this isn't actually mine. Ashley's a grown up. She can run the program just fine herself. It doesn't all depend on me. And then I can just show up and say what I have to say. And that's my example. Thank you for being glad yes.
I just sent Julie a private message saying, I'm glad you ate that cookie.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I can go next. Julie, are you done, or is there anything else you want to?
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone, I'm Lizzie Dumois. I think, it's interesting hearing both Scott, you, and Ashley talk, because I feel like I had asked Ashley about the subtypes because I've actually never really looked at the subtypes of a 1 before. And so I put social, but I think I identify more with the sexual type. But I think it might be like a mixture of both, or just very prominent for both. And the reason I share this is because of my story about being a 1. So I used to work at a university with college students, and I led a retreat really centered around diversity, equity, justice. And so it might have been, my reaction here might have been because of the conversation that we had, but this was at a beach house, and I went out with a couple of my students to put some chairs around a fire pit, just to kind of claim the fire pit. We went back inside to get more materials. One of my students went back out and told me that someone had moved our chairs to a different fire pit. And I was like so infuriated. I stormed out of the beach house, and my friends laugh at me because this is just the epitome of who I am. And so they always reference this story. But I said, this is about justice. And I like stormed out of the beach house. And when I got there, I talked to the people about moving our chairs, and I'm like, hey, that's not cool. Like, this is ours. And we were here first, kind of thing. So I say that because I also think my anger, I was asking my partner the other day, like, is my anger most repressed, a little repressed, or like fully there? And I think it depends on the situation, but I do think that my anger will come across as frustration more so than it does like blatant anger. So I think that feels like the social type, but then I also get so frustrated with our systems, and that feels more like a sexual type. So anyways, that's my story. So it's always about justice for me and what is right. And I hold other people to that standard. And when they don't, meet that standard, it's just, yeah, it's really frustrating.
I love that story.
I can go next. Yeah, my name is Travis Foxness. Glad to be on here. And I look really blue, and I'm just wondering if I have scurvy or something. It's odd. I don't know, but yeah, we have a thunderstorm here too. If you hear that in the background. For me, my journey, for the last couple of years, I did a lot of deep diving into like really thinking I was an Enneagram 8, and so I'm a sexual 1, by the way, 1-1. And I really resonate with all the features of kind of the stereotypical things, the strength, the confidence, the standing up to justice, the high energy, kind of these types of things, not having problems with conflict, those kind of things. And I was actually having a conversation with Scott at his house. And as we were kind of talking through that, the one thing is we kind of got into different aspects of my story was that kind of Scott honed in on this thing of like your time orientation, though, is not really future focused. And as a 1, that would be a feature of an 8, to be future focused. You seem much more present focused. And so he kind of was like, why don't you try on the counter 1? Look at that. And I mean, so I hadn't done any diving or deep diving into the 1 at all, really, except for knowing things like, again, more of the stereotypical surface things of like perfectionism and being self-critical. And so I'm laughing, thinking there's no way I'm that, because I'm not those things. But then reading Chestnut's account of the sexual 1 and those features of like zeal and, almost like, I think I read like a murderous rage and things like that. And I was like, man, and then I think just, that idea of being more of a reformer than a perfectionist, where a lot of it for me would be to reform outwardly. And it's not that inward focus. And so much of that stuff was like, wow, the things that made sense about the 8 were super eclipsed by what really made sense about the 1-1-1. And it was like, wow, Scott, man, you really nailed it. So that was kind of my journey into more understanding, I think, me as that.
Hello, I'm Stephanie, and I am a self-preservation 1. And part of, I think, what makes me a 1, or how you might see it played out, is I like to work hard. I feel like that is the right thing to do. And an example of how others perceive me is several years ago, I had just gotten a promotion, and someone from another department had walked into our office. We had a little cube land, and she said to my colleagues, Stephanie is now going to sit in her office and judge the rest of you for not working as hard as she does. So that was very hurtful, but again, it was really eye-opening to hear that that's how others are perceiving me. So that launched my journey for self-growth.
as you shared that, Stephanie, I saw all the ones' eyes just pop open, and I'm guessing like their hearts dropped to the bottom of their stomach as you shared that story. I don't know if any ones want to share a similar experience or.
I had people I remember when I was in grad school, one time I was out with some friends and I must have said something and somebody said, "That's it, Julie, get up on your high horse." And I was like, what? So it was really painful. I still remember that. I didn't understand it. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not doing that. But
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Has everyone had a chance to go? Okay. Thank you all for answering that question. So honestly, I feel a real willingness to learn from each other and to be vulnerable, and it's really appreciated. As we often communicate, doing this work for ourselves helps everyone heal, and we all need to raise our collective consciousness, and we all need some healing, especially on a week like this week. So thank you. And I guess my question is, how do you see, I know some of you are kind of new to figuring out your dominant instinct, but let's hone in on the dominant instinct for a moment. And maybe even it can be related to your subtype specifically, but it doesn't have to be. In what ways do you see your dominant instinct showing up day to day? Do you have any sort of tangible ways that you're like, yeah, no, I see that sexual dominant instinct showing up, or I see that self-preservation instinct showing up?
Well, when I was thinking about this question, I really struggled with it. And I think it's because when I think about like connecting the emotional passion of anger to my dominant instinct, I feel like it's so repressed, it's hard to find, because I do repress my anger quite a bit. And even that description of turning it to warmth, I'm like, oh yeah, I totally do that. And the best example I can really think of is in my previous job. I really consistently found myself um, being being unhappy with the way certain things were, whether it was like within the organization or within my team, and then also within myself. And it was kind of this major conflict that I experienced often. And so I think to compensate for these things that I felt irritated about, or that I really genuinely thought could be better, I worked extra hard and took even more responsibility. And I think it was my way of protecting myself in a sense, because I can also see my own imperfections very glaringly a lot of the time. And so to me, I thought, well, if I work harder than anybody, if I am an amazing example of being a good person, and if I take more responsibility, then like I will be safe. I will feel okay. There's no way anyone can blame me or can find fault in me. And so I created structures also within that to feel safe, like within my team. And what it turned into, I think, was just more resentment for those who I felt like weren't working as hard as me. So Stephanie, when you shared that, I really felt it, because the fact that somebody said that to you, I'm like, oh my gosh, like people probably have perceived me that way before. And yet it's kind of true to an extent. And I think the catalyst for me in really reflecting on these things came when my job suddenly ended. A few months ago, I was kind of unexpectedly removed from my role, and there were some things that came back to these perfectionistic ways that I have, and it was very super painful. And yet it was the first time where I was like, I've tried to control every detail, in a sense, to protect myself so that no one will find fault in me, that I'll be above reproach, all of these things. And yet it still didn't work, because I actually can't control what other people think about me. And so all of it in trying to create this image of me being good and being blameless, I think I actually just betrayed myself in all of that. I betrayed myself with um, giving myself in a certain way, sacrificing in a way that actually just built the resentment, and um, and didn't create pathways for connection, which I think is ultimately what we're all looking for. So.
Wow, thank you for sharing that.
It's funny you talked about how the ones can sometimes type intellectual, and then they realize that their pursuit of knowledge is actually more about justifying their current understanding of rightness rather than actually learning things. And I've had to become aware of that in myself. I started experiencing a lot of cognitive dissonance around certain belief systems, certain worldviews, certain philosophies, theologies, whatever, when people that I respected and loved had differing opinions than me. Uh, and I started hunting and like digging for things to reinforce my own worldview. And once I saw and realized what I was doing, and the reason why I bring that up is because my visceral response was anger that we were not all on the same page about what is right, and that's something that I've become much more comfortable with, and I'm really thankful to say that getting invited into that space of gray or even ambiguity or uncertainty has become much easier for me. But it used to be almost impossible, and I used to have to delineate and create clean lines of like in, out, right, wrong, and anything on either side of this line. Those are the only two categories. And my life, my brain, my worldview has slowly gone from a page with one line in the middle to a dodecahedron of different facets and sides of and perspectives of things. And so I've been grateful for that. And I think it is because of the awareness of that dynamic at play that I've been able to move into complexity and move into nuance, which I'm really grateful for. But yeah, it was funny that intellectual, that cognitive dissonance was accompanied by a very strong visceral anger. You know, I'm angrily typing in things into search bars and pulling up articles. And yeah, so that was something I didn't like in myself. It was pretty ugly to like witness, and then embarrassing after the fact. I'm like, what email did I just send? Like, what text message did I just put out there? Like, wow. So yeah, that's been my experience with that.
Yeah, that is such a great example of the temptation for which we all have, but for the one to have the confirmation bias, right? To sort of go after only the information that sort of supports what they want to think. Sevens have that challenge as well. I'm curious if you're able to start noticing in real time when you feel that coming up in you now, if like you have a view and then you find yourself wanting to engage in that old pattern. Do you see it now as it's happening?
Even beyond that, I've come to just expect it when I approach anything that's complicated or complex, or in fact, anything, because almost everything in my life is more complex than I think it is. So specifically in my personal life, in my role as a faith leader, as a pastor, I don't have the luxury of just being able to platform one opinion and everyone's not, well, some people do, but I don't find in myself the privilege to do that. I have to figure out how to hold so many people's passionate views and opinions in tension, and allow people to come into relationship rather than distance and throw stones. I would rather bring people into the center to wrestle than to back away and throw stones. So I find myself as somebody who's trying to bring community together. I have to posture myself already before I even enter into a question, before I even ever enter into a point of view, with the knowledge that there will be a dissonance in me, and I need to know how to hold that open-handedly and accept that it's more complicated than I want it to be. And what I've found is that I actually haven't had to release my convictions in the midst of that. You would think like, oh, if you get comfortable in the gray, then you have to let go of what's right or what you think is right. And I haven't actually found that to be the case. But it just moves my world from a monochromatic environment to a world of color. It's almost like the Wizard of Oz, right? Like when Dorothy steps out into Oz for the first time. And I can only imagine those moviegoers, you know, they're watching a black and white film, and then all of a sudden everything's in Technicolor, and it's like, whoa. That's how I feel that process has kind of enlivened my world. And I'm babbling now, but
no, you're not. No, that was really good. Thank you. Who's next?
I want to hear, Lindsay had written in the chat, like, oh, I'm resonating with what you're saying, Lane. So I wonder if that's a natural dovetail.
Yeah, I can share. Yeah, Lane, I like deeply relate with the black and white moving to gray. Specifically, I think for me, like my whole life, it was just very black and white about different things. And I think so much of that is because of the environment that I was raised in. It was very homogenous in every way. And then when I came to college and really started wrestling with just like the systems and our societal structures, and realizing even my place as a white woman in this world, like what that looks like for me, everything became more gray for me. And there wasn't a hard and fast black and white rule anymore. It was just very, very much more gray. And I feel like that's where I live now. And it used to be so uncomfortable for me. Like I did not like being in the gray. I wanted to know, I wanted the answer. I wanted to be in the black and white. It's either or. But it's just, life is just not that. And I'm proud of myself for the growth, because I feel like living in the gray is like a huge step for me to be able to feel comfortable with that. And then I think with that too, Ashley had mentioned earlier, like learning to befriend your anger as a one. I think there's instances where I most definitely do. And then instances where it's just like, I need to, like I said, it comes out more as frustration for me. I think my work, a lot of my work has been around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so for me, it's very much about justice again, and really like wanting people to know like what I know about some of the systems that are in place, and how systemic oppression is very real and affects so many communities of color, LGBTQ students. It's when I bring up my wanting to change like a curriculum or a policy that doesn't necessarily align with the organization or the institution, that it becomes very frustrating for me. And I recognize I can't be here anymore, because this is not a values alignment for me, because we all need to be on the same page if we're going to move forward when it comes to issues of justice. So that's been my frustration, I think, in some of the places that I've worked in.
It's really helpful.
Yeah, I feel very inspired after hearing both Lane and Lindsay, like just kind of imagining like the social one or like the teacher coming through. I don't know if anybody else is seeing that, but if I can make that observation, there's like a tremendous sense of like vision and idealism. I think that social instinct with the one really holds. So thank you both for sharing.
For me, I think of fire. And so I guess I just think of, speaking of the subtype, but especially within the one for me of the sexual, of just, it's always like for me managing fire, this idea that fire is both illuminating and destructive. A bonfire versus a house fire, both things have and so I've had feedback from people that, hey Travis, when I'm around you, your passion, it's almost like it illuminates my courage, their courage, or and so it's like maybe that passion can be shedding light on an ideal that I'm so stoked about through myself or others, about changing and bringing change to the world. But then on the flip side, it's like this kind of curse of walking with, again, that passion to where it's internally damaging me, or it, because if there's things I can't change, or my friends can't change, or the idea is not good enough, or we just realize, I mean, we're not superheroes, we can't change the world totally, I mean, this is never going to be perfected, that there's almost as if there's a cost to that, and that comes out in the internal anger, where I can be a volcano, and that's under the surface of me. So it's like, yeah, that's what I think of in terms of fire and anger and passion.
It's a really strong visual, Travis. Thank you. I'm going to think about that one.
I'll go ahead and piggyback on that, since we're the same subtype. For me, how I describe it is, well, I had gone to the CP Enneagram Retreat A last October. And when I was there, I said to Uranio and Beatrice, I said, this is what I feel like is all the time inside of me, I have a fireball. This just giant fireball of energy all the time, is this intensity. And the only thing I know what to do with it is either to fight or to just like squish it down as hard as I possibly can. Help me. There's got to be something else I could do with this, because it wants to do those two. I'm either going to squish it down as a 1 and just not feel it, not acknowledge it, or I am going to fight everybody with this thing. So I think learning about the term zeal, I really resonate with that a lot, because I think that my passion does come out that way a lot. I think to others who aren't feeling that intensity, it feels like zeal or something like that, just really intense. And I think I feel angry when I see, another thing I think about is I think a lot about potential. Like I see a lot of potential in a lot of things in the world, in people. I think it doesn't have to be like it is. There are lots of beautiful ways that things could be. And so I feel really angry when things don't meet the potential. And I will tend to do that individually with people in my life, which is probably not much appreciated by them. But it's sort of like, I feel like it starts to be like, if everybody around me is okay and I can make sure they're okay, then I'm going to be okay. So I think it plays out sort of that way. I know it's not, I'm learning that that's, not really true. It's just that that's how it feels. I need to make sure all these people are where they need to be, and then we'll all be okay. We'll be fine.
Julie, I love that, using Travis's image of like the fire, then you're like, it's like a fireball. I'm like, I'm not sure what to do with it. And using the CP program language of deconstructors, I was reading the sexual ones yesterday, and it said like, practice smiling sweetly when giving your feedback or advice. And I'm wondering what that's like for you, or even how that looks like. If it feels like a fire, what would be the like metaphor to translate like smiling sweetly and giving more? I just can't imagine that journey for a sexual one.
Yeah, it's, if you listen to their podcast about the describing the different instinctual sequences, did you hear that one? They were talking about, so I'm sexual, self-pres, social, and they were talking about this type being sort of like a truth teller and very authentic. And that's where I feel like I'm coming from with my energy. It's for authenticity and sort of truth telling as I see it. But so it's like, for me, smiling sweetly while I say something like that feels fake. Like it doesn't, I don't know that I can deliver like that. It's not authentic. And so why would I even say it? So unless I can be from a place where I feel like it's coming authentically from me, but it's maybe not charged with all my anger, which is probably really about something else, then I've probably got something constructive to say. But just putting a fake front on it, it doesn't sound like super appealing to me. You know what I mean? It might be true, but I'm like, I don't know if that answers the question at all.
Yes, thank you.
Kind of piggybacking on that, I take a little bit of a different approach, but similarly recognizing that my initial response to most things is anger, but then also feeling like being angry is bad, and then trying to push that down Scott, you mentioned reaction formation. I do cover it up with warmth. And there was an example a couple of weeks ago. I was doing a training with a colleague, and he wanted to do something a certain way, and that wasn't really the way that the CRM was built to work. And so I just said, "Oh, I love that you're being so creative with how to use the tools." And then kind of redirecting of like, "Hey, this is actually how it was meant to be used." And he's like, "Well, you know, the Wrath of Stephanie sure isn't that bad." And I was like to myself, it depends on who you ask, you know, because I was working really hard to keep things upbeat and positive, but I was like, that's wrong.
Oh, that's such a great example of like, yeah, the warmth of the self-preservation. And so the next question we have for you all, and maybe we can go in just reverse order, is in what ways do you all feel misunderstood by being a type one?
Does that mean you want me to start? Okay. So I think in striving for rightness or for things to be correct, I could be perceived as hypercritical. And I feel misunderstood in that way because it's not out of a place of wanting to be punitive, but it's out of a place of care. And like, for instance, you know, I work in an institution of higher education. If I send an email that has a misspelling, then that reflects poorly on my employer. So it wouldn't, I would want to receive that correction, and I wouldn't view it as being criticized.
Thank you, Stephanie. I know I declared an order to it. We don't have to go in order if that doesn't feel right. Just if anyone wants to share, in what ways do you feel misunderstood? Right? Like people who are like, oh, ones are like this. And you're like, you don't like fully get it.
Actually, this is going to sound a little self-indulgent, perhaps, and God forbid one's ever be self-indulgent. But I think sometimes what I perceive from people is that because I present well and so confidently, people think that I have it all together and that I'm completely self-sufficient and don't need very much. And I actually need a lot, more than I'd like to admit. And so I think maybe I resonate with like a repressed sexual. Again, I don't feel like an expert in the subtypes in any way, but I feel like that kind of one-to-one advocacy of making things better. I feel like I lack that. I feel like I lack the courage to tell people one-on-one what I need from them or what I need to see change. Yeah. So, and when you ask, how do you feel misunderstood? Sometimes I feel like people don't see that I have strong needs. If you've seen Encanto, I feel like Luisa a lot. I feel like she's just always carrying the village on her shoulders, and people are like, "Oh, Luisa's got it. You know, she's got it. She's strong." And on the inside, I'm like, I'm about to crack. So I feel like that's the misunderstoodness that I experience.
That's a really good example, and I can feel that from you, Lane, when you talk about that sort of almost internalized pressure to model something. You're doing it well. You're successful at it, right? People then see what you're presenting, but underneath there's a whole bunch more going on. Thank you for sharing that.
I also felt like, you know, when I saw that movie, there was a thread on a Facebook group, and people kept saying, "Well, Louise is obviously an 8," and I was like, "She's got one all over her to me because she's just really carrying the weight of the world. Everything's her responsibility, and she's about to crack, and no one knows it." So I thought the same thing, Lane. I really resonated with that. I think one thing I kind of like what Stephanie was saying. I think I feel misunderstood in that intentions from ones are our intentions are really good. It's because we see some beautiful vision of how things could be, and I just don't understand sometimes how other people don't see it. That's what it feels like to me. How do you not see what I see? That's what, um, and then I and then I do feel angry that the reality doesn't match what I see. So it's again, I think things that people don't know is maybe that how much we're measuring against the potential, the beautiful potential we see. And that also one other thing that I think I know that I'm doing a lot is I'm constantly sort of doing a risk assessment. So a vigilant risk assessment. So let's see if this thing is really likely to occur, even if it's low stakes, I'm not going to do it because it's pretty likely. Or if it's not very likely, but it's really high stakes, I'm also not going to do that. So a lot of my actions are based on my assessment of the potential and also the potential risks that might happen. And it's all the criticism and stuff is coming from there as a way to kind of manage and control all that.
I think
Yeah,
I
Laura.
think a way that I can sometimes feel misunderstood is that I'm very rigid. Because where I can be rigid and I do know what I want a lot of the time, I also work pretty hard to be flexible. And I think, like, authentically, if someone comes with an idea or a different way to do something that's better than mine, that still like brings a good outcome, like I'm super willing to lean into that and learn from them. But the perception, though, can still be that that because I know what I want and I'm vocal about it, that I can't be challenged, and that I won't be able to be flexible within that.
Thank you, Laura.
I know we had mentioned the perfectionist is often associated with the one. I feel like Travis, you had mentioned like you relate more with the reformer. I feel like I relate more with that as well. But I think so many people think like I present as very like organized, I'm very planned, I'm detail oriented, and all of those things are true. But it's not in every single aspect of my life. Like I'll have laundry on the floor in my room because no one will see it. Like there's dishes in the sink that are left for a while. But I think it depends on like what I choose to be like a perfectionist or a reformer about. It's not everything. So I think that's where I feel a little bit misunderstood.
That's a great example, and you're not the first one to tell me that. So I think that's a really important, that moves us away from the stereotype generalizations that people talk about with ones. Thank you for that example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've heard Oronio Pais, he'll say that actually in some ways you can connect with people who are your dominant instinct or instinct sequences more than people who are even in your dominant Enneagram type.
Mm-hmm.
So our last question, Scott, do you want to ask it?
Yeah. So in the interest of time, I'll jump to what through the lens of the Enneagram. What does personal growth look like for you?
There's a quote by the existentialist Soren Kierkegaard. Every time I see it, pisses me off, which is why I know it's for me. It's life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. And it feels like it goes against every instinct I have. Life is nothing but problems that I must solve. And so the idea that life is more about experiencing it than it is fixing it, it challenges me and it pulls me to a place of serenity. Again, kind of that picture that I shared, like the letting go of the grip, and there's a line from the Sleeping at Last, he did those songs on the Enneagram. There's a line in the one song to hold it more loosely, but somehow much more dearly. That line just like, it felt like my compass aligned, like, oh, that's where I need to go. I need to be able to hold what I love and what I value and what I virtue as dearly, but loosely. Yeah, so that feels like the point of growth for me.
I really resonate with what you said with all that, because I feel like for me as well, there's something about, I think, right, the one is the time orientation is present focus, right? And but that the interesting thing that happens, at least for me, that I experience, is that I can be, if I'm presently in the moment trying to fix or reform or make things better, am I actually truly living in the moment? Because I don't know that we can do both things. If you're fixing, you're really not in it. And so just letting it be. So for me, it's like, yeah, it's kind of what you said, Lane, of just, being okay with just moments of chaos, of brokenness, of hurt and pain, and not always trying to have a game plan, and just letting, and live. And then in that way, actually living in the full spectrum of pain, joy, hurt, growth, whatever, but the whole thing, and not just in this, let's keep chugging along and fixing.
100%. Yeah, it's good.
For me, in trying to move towards serenity, I have found yoga to be really helpful. And I think my inner critic is constantly screaming at me. And so like, it's really hard for me to calm my mind. And so by doing the poses and focusing on the breathing, my body is forcing my mind to calm down and invoke that parasympathetic nervous system so that I can get out of my constant fight or flight mode. And it was kind of funny, a practice I was doing a couple days ago, the instructor was saying, okay, now do this pose. And then she said, and there's nothing to accomplish here. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. So it's very helpful in my mindfulness practice.
I love that.
Feels very countercultural too.
I heard a quote recently that has really been guiding for me in my growth. It was from Liz Gilbert, and she said, surrender to God and nourish yourself. And that has been this journey that I'm trying to follow. I think to surrender, to let go of the things that I can't control, and even not being like my speed of my own growth, because so often it's like, well, I've got to be better, I've got to improve. Like recently, I remember I was being perfectionistic about my perfectionism. Like, I've got to get that better. And then I realized, like, I can just trust that growth will come when it needs to come. And it's going to be at the speed it needs to be. I can trust myself to be ready when it's time, and I don't have to force it. And like, it doesn't have to be painful all the time. And so I think it's like the surrender is like stopping trying to control my own growth. And then the nourishing myself is literally listening to my human instincts and impulses, like paying attention when my body is telling me something, like, you're hungry, you should eat now, you don't need to accomplish that thing before you eat, or you're thirsty right now, you should drink something. Like, it seems so elementary and basic, but it's like coming into myself. It's not only trusting these instincts that feel like they're in my head of like good or bad, but it's trusting my body to also tell me what is going to be nourishing and good.
I love that. Thank you.
That tuning into your body. That's such a good note to just close out on. And before we transition into doing a brief meditation, I don't want to forget this moment, and I'm going to just take a screenshot of the panelists. So if you all just want to smile, there we go. I forgot to do that for our nines. So the screenshot looks like quite morbid, like actually asking people to smile. We're all like really sad. Um, but thank you all so much. I feel like I learned so much today. So thank you for your courage and just showing up and coming as prepared as you all did. Everyone's stories was really brief, like was really synced, but like the most valuable information. So I see your effort. Thank you.
Ashley, did you have some final comments before this, or do you want to go right into this?
Oh, I'll end on the tools if you want to do the meditation first.
Yeah, this actually is a great place to do it because this came up in somebody's comments. I'm sorry, I don't remember who. It might have been Travis, where the work that we're constantly doing when we're listening to the ego of our type and being controlled by the passion, regardless of your type, is distracting us from being present. Sometimes I look at the Enneagram as 9 primary types of perpetual distraction from living our actual true lives. And so sometimes the simplest things we can do in terms of our work is just coming back to the present moment, coming back to the breath. And that can be really uncomfortable if you haven't done any kind of mindfulness or meditation work. It can be a little uncomfortable, but we have to learn to get comfortable with being uncomfortable if we're gonna get growth. So if you can come off camera if you want. You keep your cameras on, it doesn't matter. But if you can just close your eyes and just put your back firmly up against the chair with kind of an elongated spine. Rest your hands in a way that's sort of comfortable.
Yeah.
I want you to take in.
And Scott, I'm interrupting you real quick just because we have a lot of ones on our panel. I just want to ensure you that we will get you out on time today. So this will just take a couple minutes.
So just find your breath. Just take 3 cleansing breaths at your own pace. Deep inhale all the way in, and when you take the air all the way in and you feel like you can't take it anymore, maybe take in just a little bit more. Maybe hold it for a minute and then you release out of the mouth. And we do it again. We fill ourselves up. We hold and we release. When you breathe out, get all the air out. When you feel like you can't exhale, push a little bit more air out and do a 3rd cleansing breath, if you will. And now you transition into a normal breath, but you're focused your attention only on the breath. As you breathe in, you follow the air into your belly, into your lungs, you fill yourself up. And as you release, you follow the breath out. You keep your attention on that breath. And if your mind starts to wander, that's okay. You just observe it, bring it back to the breath. Just for the next 30 seconds or so, we're going to just stay with the breath. Now I want you to just turn your attention to a quick body scan. Your eyes closed and your breath still be your primary source of attention. You're going to relax your attention on that breath somewhat, and you're going to do a body scan. I want to first go up to the top of the head. What are you noticing? You feel a tension in your head? If so, can you relax your face, let your jaw go slack? Scan down through the eyes, the face. Still breathing. Draw your attention down through the neck and your chest, just noticing any sensations that you might be experiencing. Not judging them, not fixing them, just noticing them. Continuing in our breath, we let our attention go down around our core. How's our stomach feeling? What are we observing there? Just noticing. Our attention from there goes down into our hips and our sit bones and our thighs. What sensation? What's there? Maybe if you notice a bit of tension, maybe just take a deep breath into that area. Just put breath into that spot. And the attention continues to go down through the knees, the calf muscles and the shins, and into the feet. Now I want you to just wiggle your fingers and your toes, and when you're ready, just bring your attention back to the room. Open your eyes. And in just that little bit of moment, I hope you found a little sense of grounding and can remember that at any point in your day, at any time, that's available to you. 2 minutes, 3 minutes, just coming back to the breath, noticing what's true in you, what's true in the body, what's true in the heart, what's true in the mind, coming back to the breath. Ashley.
Thank you, Scott. So grounding. If you're one, something that we recommend is stopping throughout the day to breathe and getting in tune with your body and what you're feeling. And if you are working at a desk, at least every 60 minutes, you need to be stretching or going on a walk or, just bending over, doing a quick body scan and really breathing. And we mentioned this earlier, but befriend and talk to your anger. Have a dialogue with the inner critic and tease them a little bit, or say, "Wait, what am I angry about?" Or, "Actually, inner critic, I don't know if this is. I don't know if I want you in charge today." And it sounds a little silly, but learn to have those conversations out loud and in your head as a way and a path toward integration. And one tool, if you are in relationship with a type 1, and I'll let Scott close out on this part, if you can just briefly talk about accountability and for people who have ones in their life, what that looks like.
Yeah, so I think we're mostly here with ones, but yeah, do what you say you're going to do with the ones in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Be accountable, and adopt lightness in your own life. So when you're with them, they can experience your lightness and be encouraged to find lightness and fun and playfulness. And for you as ones, one other final bit of advice would be, of all types, you'll get better by getting worse. You need to do less, become less, put less pressure on yourself, and just keep coming back to yourself. I love the quote that Lane shared. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. I love that.